Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to have you all here. This is going to be a remarkable evening. My name's Suzanne Watson. I'm Executive Director for Meeting House Arts. And we have been having here the month of May a extravaganza, really, around something that Ken Sparta, who is in the audience tonight, he sparked this idea with a simple comment, which was, nobody knows we have a working waterfront in Freeport, Maine. And we decided we'd show there is a working waterfront in Freeport, Maine. And for the month of May, we have not only had a 10-day exhibit. I don't know how many of you saw the exhibit that was here in the gallery last 2 weeks. I give a lot of credit to Mandy McPherson, who's sitting in back there, as well as Kate Werner. There was a heck of a lot of research, and Maine Coast Fishermen Association was a partner in that, and a very big partner. They were the ones who gave us the creds to actually talk about the working waterfront in a way that it made sense. And I'm hoping to the folks who are here tonight and the working waterfront people who are here tonight will understand that we worked really hard to get it right. Freeport Historical Society, who's also represented here tonight, but Freeport Historical Society gave us tons and tons of information, facts, photographs that we utilized, and we juxtaposed what we had in current day to past. And it was really, I thought, important to give that sense that we're not new. We've been here for generations and decades and centuries, really. So the other three elements of this month of May for the working waterfront are, we had a panel that unfortunately had to be postponed until September. We kind of screwed up, and I'm going to admit it right up front, that we really didn't schedule any of this within the reality that the working waterfront people, this is the high season. This is when everybody's out on the water. Who knew? The second panel, which you're going to listen to tonight, is really about looking at the generations, the storytelling, if you will, of what we have here. So this is really an important aspect, a depth, if you will, of who and what we are to learn about the working waterfront. So I'm hoping you'll enjoy this tonight. I will introduce Eric Smith here in a minute, who will moderate this panel, and he will introduce in turn the speakers tonight. But I want to let you know the third event, which is next Thursday night, and really the culmination, the last event, and I've kind of missed a huge piece here, which is we have the Pinkies in our midst. The Pinkies are the inspiration. Thank you. The Pinkies are the inspiration of this whole year, because the Pinkies came to visit, to live with us last October, thanks to Pamela Moulton, or Posey, the artist. And oh, by the way, she's the inspiration for this hat. I forgot. This is eelgrass. And the third event, the third panel, which is next Thursday night at 7 o'clock, I hope you'll all come to, because it will be a memorable event. It's going to be what we call the eelgrass. It's really recognizing all the research and the value added that eelgrass brings to our lives, to the fishermen's lives. That's the incubator of all of the critters that we're talking about with the working waterfront. So we will have a Passamaquoddy language keeper in Dwayne Toma, who will be here. That's really a very rare occurrence, and he will be here to lead us in song and dance, and to learn about the underwater world of eelgrass and its importance and how we're working to restore it. So I've gone on long enough. I want to introduce Eric Smith, who's sitting right here to my left, and he is Executive Director for Freeport Historical Society and a partner in all of this work. He is also part and parcel, a principal with this very facility that we're sitting in, First Parish Church. And he is a town councilor. He kind of serves three purposes, which is great. He's also lived here in this town, born and raised in this town, so he understands exactly what the history is from so many aspects. So with all of that, I'm going to say, welcome, Eric.
Thanks, Suzanne, and thank you to Meeting House Arts for putting this whole month-long program on the working waterfront together. It is particularly valuable for Freeport Historical Society to be part of this program because certainly, as Suzanne said, we collect lots of photographs, lots of artifacts, lots of records about the various industries of the working waterfront through the hundreds of years of Freeport's history. But tonight's panel is really about collecting living history. And the storytelling that you're going to hear tonight is really why we're here. So as I have told all of these folks, which may come as a surprise to many of you, I'm not really here to talk. So I'm here just to ask a couple of questions and not get in the way of the storytelling. But we're going to start off up here, and then I know that quite a few of you will have questions and some of your own stories to share, so we want to get to that as well. So first, let me introduce who else is up here. You have short bios in your program, but right here to my left is John Coffin. John, according to a 1999 article when he had been lobstering for 36 years, which was 26 years ago, and I asked John if that meant he'd been lobstering for 62 years, and he said, I don't know. But we'll learn more about that. Don Ulrichsen, who, as you say, has also been fishing well into his 80s, and you can see the video of that online. We'll hear more from him. And then Eric Horn, who represents a younger generation of aquaculture and a different type of fishing industry on Freeport's coast. But one of the things that I think is important about this panel is that it really does represent multi-generational families, and I think we're going to hear about that, and that is certainly a part of the working waterfront here in Freeport, is how those traditions both have been passed down, have been adapted, and continue to change. So I'd like to start off by asking each of you what the earliest memory you have is of being on the water in Maine. And I'm going to use that phrase a lot, and by being on the water, I mean on the bay, in salt water. But what is your earliest memory of being out on the water in a boat? And you've got to use that, whether you want to or not.
For me, we had a camp down there on Flying Point, and we went down there, and we had a skiff, and that was my first time down there. We went there for a week or two every summer, and we shared it with other family.
And so you lived here in Freeport, but you still went to a camp on Flying Point.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and which a lot of people did.
Yeah. Didn't need to go anywhere else.
Don, how about you? Your mic's over there.
I can't remember the way. I can remember being down there when I was just about big enough to walk, because my father and grandfather used to go smelting with a drag seine in the fall, and they hauled traps, and I can remember going cohogging with my grandfather, but I wasn't very old when I started. So.
And how about you, Eric? You've got to share that one.
Okay. So we came here in 1975. I was probably 5 or 6 years old, 6 years old. And my dad had a old wooden sailboat that he kept. And when he first brought my brother and I down on the shore, he said, I want to show you my sailboat. And we went out and we saw this white glow underwater, and that was his boat had sunk. So that's my earliest memory. I never really
made quite an impression. And then kind of skipping forward, when do you remember knowing that you wanted to make your living on the water?
When I was halfway through the Navy, I was getting ready back then. I was knitting.
Oh, just hold that a little closer.
I was, what was I doing?
When you got out of the Navy,
When
you
I got
said,
out of the
yeah.
Navy, yeah. I even took some stuff down there with me to work when I was on the ship, sewing. And we had, because I had to go there. And I started that, I was 2 years in, and I had four when I got out. That's how it started with me. Anyway, as soon as I got out, we started going.
And you started this wasn't something that you took on from a family tradition. You said your family were builders primarily. Was there something in particular, other than being in the Navy, that when you came back, you decided that's what you wanted to do?
Now, I've often wondered about that myself, actually. And I don't know why I decided to do that, because my brother became one of the builders. And I don't know why. There was times I wished I had, but.
And you decided you were going to go into lobstering, and you just started making traps yourself.
Yeah, that's what you had to do then.
Did you learn that from somebody else in town?
No, I don't think so. There was traps around, but it didn't take much. My father was pretty good at building anything. So, no, we didn't have a problem with that. No, I wish it was that way now, actually.
How about you, Don? When do you remember knowing you wanted to make a living on the water?
Probably as soon as I could remember, I could remember doing things with my father and grandfather, so they kept me busy some days doing things, so that's probably when I learned that. Didn't know enough to know when I wanted to or not, probably.
Well, that's another question. Was it a choice or was it an expectation?
No, I think probably it was some of both. But we had to work when we were young, so.
And what about you, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on McCoy Bay and worked on the water in the summers, so I always loved it. And I think when it came time to raising a family, and I knew I wanted to work outside, my father had already started dabbling with oyster farming and quahog farming before that, so the pieces were there, but I think I was looking for something a little different, so I decided to make a go at it with my wife.
So we were talking off stage a little before, and Don and John were talking about what the harbor looked like back in the 1950s. And I want to know if you can share what if you were going to describe the Harrisseeket and South Freeport Harbor, what would you, if you went down to the town wharf when you started fishing, what would you be looking at?
You would be looking at how much empty harbor. There was very few boats there. And there was, yes, there was same kind of, there was not a modern thing going on like the boatyards got now, but there was 2 boatyards there. And, but it really, we were swimming off the town docks and jumping around and everything, but there really wasn't much going on. There was a few fishermen that really weren't year-round fishermen. There wasn't any there at that time that I know of. And even when I got out of the Navy and started, there was people that went, but they had winter jobs and stuff. They didn't go year-round. And that's pretty much the way it was until, I don't know when actually, so long ago. I'm so old, I can't remember.
Was there, how many lobster boats, per se, were there when you started in the Harrisseeket?
Well, like I say, for people that were doing it, there were none. And that I know of, I can't remember any. You?
5 probably there.
Yeah, but they weren't they weren't, they didn't make a living doing it, no, they just did it in the summer.
That was a summer.
Yeah, but there was no boats there, and I remember some people, town people got together because a couple of boys that lived down there were starting to put boats out and renting the, I think there's people here probably know what I'm talking about, but they started doing that, and then got the town all wound up, so said they were gonna end up owning them all, so then they formed a committee and stopped them from doing it pretty much. It didn't stop them, but it slowed it up. But there was so few boats, it was, and they were all, when you went to the town dock, most of them were to the south. But anyway, that's the way it was until, I don't know, really, once we started buying lobsters down there and stuff, things started to go bigger. We got more boats there. And we had more people from around. Once we started fishing out of there, other people started going too. They didn't sell to us. So, yeah.
And Don, what do you remember from your earliest days of fishing, what the harbor looked like at that point?
I never fished out of the harbor.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good point.
I stayed up
Yeah.
where there was
Yeah.
people.
And what did the bay look like from your perspective?
Well, there's more boats up at Flying Point Shore now, with pleasure boats, but there wasn't that many there. We had my father and grandfather, then Paul Coffin hooked into it part way, but it was pretty quiet.
And we were talking about making traps. Did you learn making traps in your family?
I'm sure I did. I've got stuff to build traps with. I can build a lot of traps in a short time.
Yeah. So what would you say, I mean, we've obviously described the difference in how it looked, but if you look back over the course of your time fishing, what would you say is the most striking change that you've seen
There
in
isn't
waterfront?
much eelgrass. There isn't as much eelgrass, but I can remember when there was no eelgrass before, probably back in the 50s. And then it came back, and now it's died out, but I think it is coming back. So maybe the tides are getting bigger than they were back in. That might be the only big difference.
A lot bigger.
You were talking about that as well. What would you say has been the largest tides you've seen, and when were those?
Me?
Either one of you.
Yes. Well, I think we saw the largest one we had two last, I don't remember exactly, last winter, was it? Or when it was? No, it wasn't winter. But anyway, yes, that we had 2 weeks apart, right? And that last one was the biggest one, I think, but not by miles, but it was the biggest one, and the other one was many years ago. Mm-hmm. So that happened 2 weeks apart, and down there, we had the most water up on our property than ever been there before.
And what would you say, John, is the biggest change over your 60-some years of fishing? What do you think about as the biggest change?
It depends what you're talking about. If you're talking about lobsters themselves, we didn't have many when we started. We came all the way up in. We had a big hauls for quite a few years. Cumberland County was the best in the state for a while, and I don't know. I built that boat in 1975, and it was because it was getting better. And then, I don't know, it's the last 3 or 4 years that I've been fishing, you can really see it. going down, but it went down before that, but it easing down took a long time. It was quite a long period of time, from the 70s up to now. But in the meantime, I don't know, what is it, 15 years or so, they got all of them down to the east. And now they're losing them too. So I know nobody knows what's going to happen with that. But the water, I remember we never see water much over 60, did we? 64, 5?
Hurricane Carol and Edna
Yeah.
might be when we got the biggest part of that. That was a while ago.
But last summer, one of the guys that fishes for us, coming up by the Pound of Tea, said that there was water at 75 degrees. That's pretty hot, because we never saw it in the low 40s. That's what I remember anyway. So it is changing, all right, big time.
And when you first started, what was the range of price you were getting for lobster?
When we started, the least I ever got was 50 cents a pound. And it was 90 cents if you fished in the winter, and they were hard shells. And it stayed that way. It didn't change much, where I sold anyway. And then it started going up, of course, to what it is now, but way different. But now, you want to buy a barrel of redfish, good stuff. Back then, it was $5, $6 a barrel. Now it's 300. So, that's a change. So that's what we're up against. Fuel. Used to be diesel was always cheaper than gas, but they changed that in '73 and flopped that over because everyone switched to diesel. That's what I always blamed it on anyway. So that's about the worst of it, I think, for me.
How about you, Don? What's the cost, do you think, that's changed between the price of what you're pulling in versus what you're paying to go out? Well, if we started talking about the price of lobster, and we were talking about that before, but John was just talking about what the costs are of actually doing the fishing. Can you just talk about how that's changed over your time?
Yeah, I can remember there's some slips I found up in my attic for 17 cents for lobsters. I can't tell you what month it was or what year it was, but they gradually worked back up. But that's all. The price of bait has changed a lot. Because I can remember we would go to Portland, they'd give you redfish for nothing, just to get rid of it, and that isn't that way anymore.
Oh, $300.
So, John, at some point you went from just catching and to going into the restaurant business. And so that gives you a different perspective on the visitors, I would say, to the waterfront. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can talk about how you've seen that change of who's coming to Freeport and visiting the waterfront.
It's a lot. It is way. I mean, when we first started, if I took up in the winter, I put all my traps down there. There was like 1,500 of them or so. We had room. Now we don't have room to pack anything. So it's been wicked, and it's worse. It's even now because we just no room down there on anywhere for anybody. Actually, it's crowded as heck, and I don't see it getting any different. But it took us quite a while to really get going. We've been there 54 years. So, first 10.
Yeah. My other question for you, and I do want to give over to Eric in a minute, but because you all have been, Don and John, you've been doing this, and your families have been in Freeport for quite a while, in different industries. And I know, John, one of the reasons your boat is named the Tam O'Shanter is because you're descended from the captain of the original Tam O'Shanter that was built in Freeport. And Don, you've had a whole line of fishermen in your family. Where do you see yourselves in the lineage of the working waterfront of Freeport? How do you consider your time in the scope of your family's history here?
I don't know. Depends what you mean. I think it's been great for us anyway, and I've got a son and grandsons in it, and I don't know. I think it goes well, but right now there's a lot of issues we have now that we've never had. Like you can't hire anybody to do anything, and we got major parking issues, and it just gets worse because there's more and more people. That's what it is, and but I've been pretty satisfied with it. I liked it, what we did, the way it's going.
Yep. How about you, Don? How do you see this yourself? And you're right in the middle. You've said your father, your grandfather, your uncles were fishing, and your sons are both fishing and working on boats now. How do you see your time in the middle of all of that, and what you've both inherited and what you've passed on?
I don't say much has changed. I just grew up and it just kept going, that's all. I don't see any real thing that has changed.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the boat building business that you and your sons have?
Oh, I started doing that, and the boys have more or less taken it now. 'Cause they don't like me climbing up on top of the boats. I figure if I fell off on that concrete, I'd be done. So they kind of drive me down to the bottom part of things. I get some cows, I take care of those. I keep busy.
And what are the types of boats that your sons are working on these days?
Right now, they got a lobster boat, and I guess they've had 5 of them in there this winter. Well, the one before this one had 28 holes in one side of it because they tried resting on some granite, and it didn't make out good. But it looked like new when it left. The guy was happy, and the insurance company was happy, so that's all that counts.
You were saying that you've developed, your business has developed quite a reputation in terms of being able to do a turnaround for folks. And how important is that for fishermen that are coming to you with repair needs?
I don't know. I think insurance companies and the boatyards down east have been sending us part of them, and we get a lot of local stuff too.
So I want to turn to you, Eric, because you have a different type of industry that you're working on. And can you just tell us a little bit about how you got into aquaculture, how you decided to do that, and how you see that fitting into the broad span of the working waterfront in Freeport?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, my dad started experimenting with quahog aquaculture back in the 70s, and I think it was right around when leases were starting to get issued in the state of Maine. I don't know the year of the first lease, but I think we'd go down to the shore and he'd look out on the bay and he'd say, my brother and I, he said, boys, this is the San Joaquin Valley of the East right here. He could see it. He thought it was a productive bay. It was like a big lung just producing all kinds of nutrients. It's a healthy bay. So in the early days, I think sort of my interest in being close to the water came directly from him. And not long after that, our dear friends, the Bradleys, moved in, I forget what year, 76, 77. But Ed and my dad, and Ed's here tonight, Ed and my dad, very close friends. And so the next thing we know, Ed and my dad are covered in mud out on the flats most weekends. And so they were experimenting. So there was a lot of that action going on in the early days. We didn't really take it that seriously as kids. We just thought these guys are having a good time down there, but we weren't sure there was any economic future, to tell you the truth. But they had fun. But then fast forward into the sort of the early 90s, mid 90s, the oyster industry was doing quite well out of the Damariscotta River. There was almost no activity occurring outside of the Damariscotta at that point. And so, but there was an opportunity to bring it outside of that part of the coast, partly because of technology changes when we were witnessing. But it was a new industry. The demand for oysters has always been very strong. So I was sort of attracted to the idea of starting a business that was, not a hobby scale, but full-on business. And my wife was interested in doing the same. So that's how we got into it. And then how it's changed, and how we fit in or don't fit in. I think there are always user conflicts when you have two people that want to operate in the same spot. So you have to be very careful. I think as an aquaculturalist, when we first started, we wanted to make darn sure we weren't operating in any places where there was an existing fishery, because the state would not issue any leases if there was another fishery going on. So I've always kind of carried that with me. As long as you can fit something in a place that's really not being used otherwise, or then I think you can have a good combination of fisheries. So the challenge, I think, going forward, and John kind of alluded to it, it's hard to find a place to park your car down the waterfront. It's also hard to find a place now more and more out on the bay as more farms spring up. So I'm cognizant of that, and I hope that, with dialogue and good neighbor kind of thinking, people can, work it out together. You mentioned earlier, John, when we were out in the room, there were no lobstermen when you started lobstering, or there were very few in Casco Bay.
There weren't any right around us that did it year-round, no.
Yeah, yeah, in the eelgrass, yeah, but very little. Yeah, you were there first. yeah. So I don't know. When we got started, there were no oyster farms, and so I kind of had a similar sensation. It's like, well, let's give it a try. But over time, the more people want to use the area, so you just have to be, careful how it grows.
One of the things I'm curious about in terms of shellfish in particular is, and you mentioned the market for lobster has been pretty steady. The cost has fluctuated and the costs have changed, but the demand has been there pretty steadily. And I think for shellfish, that's sort of changed for other species, between mussels and clams and oysters. And you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I remember down on the wharf there, I used to see people offloading bags and bags of mussels, but I didn't know anybody who ate mussels around here. Everybody was eating clams, but people were harvesting mussels. And now it seems like you go to any restaurant, you're a lot more likely to see mussels than you are to see clams. And now, of course, oysters have really hit a kind of a renaissance in Maine in particular. Have you noticed that in terms of your community and I know we don't have any clammers on the panel today, but just in your sense of how demand has shifted for shellfish in the market over time?
At one time, they were harvesting more quahogs than they were clams and mussels. Back probably in the mid-40s, And up into the mid-50s, there was a lot of quahogs up in McQueen Bay. But there was very few soft-shell clams then. And then the clams came back and the mussels were later than the mussels must have been way back after you got back, weren't they, John?
Yeah, yeah, because that, and we ended up with a lot of boats here because they did come back big time.
Yeah.
And we had boats, a lot of dogs that came down here and stayed all the time, but they stayed here long enough to clean them all up. I mean, it took 2 or 3 years, but they got them all, maybe more than that, I don't know. Huh?
Yeah, I think those mussels are coming back now, though, because there hasn't been any setting on the end lines and stuff till last summer. And last summer, there was quite a lot of them little ones growing.
Yeah, well, but it'll be more business, I guess, for these guys.
And Eric, you talked about being on the early side of the aquaculture here in the Bay. Obviously, there are, as you say, a lot more farms now. Do you get the sense that the market is growing to the demand is still outpacing the supply, or do you think that we're hitting a space where we're at capacity?
Yeah, it's a great question. Any producer you talk to is going to want to have fewer producers because you don't want to have the price collapse. We don't know. I mean, there are a lot of cities in this country, and a lot of them don't have oysters. And so the idea is that as long as the logistics can keep pushing product out, that maybe the market will grow. But at some point, supply and demand will start to, cancel each other out. And I don't know what the price will do. But so far, we've managed to stay steady on the price. But it's a concern for sure.
What do you think is next for the working waterfront in Freeport? What do you see as the biggest opportunities or the biggest challenges as we go forward from here?
I don't know, they better find some places for people to park. That's to start with. It's getting pretty bad, in my opinion, that over the years, the town has overlooked a lot of sales. Nobody thinking about it, that's all, but there was quite a few chances, but now it's pretty tight. I don't know what the answer is now, because there ain't room enough for everybody now. It's bad, all the guys. Now, it used to be, I used to get down there every morning 4 o'clock, but there'd be nobody there. Now, they start getting there, it's filled by sometimes even 6. So, you gotta, I don't know what they can do about that. That's gonna hold, you can only handle so many people in a day. I don't know. Like I say, we've been watching it for 54 years. It was easy back then, but it ain't now. No.
What about you, Don? What do you see as the next big opportunity or the biggest challenges right now to still be working on the waterfront?
Don't get down to town wharf. That's the easiest way around that. I haven't been down there for a long time, so I don't know what's going to change that now.
Well, there's just no room down over that hill.
No.
Down does not, that's the 50 feet of deep water. So that's all, the rest of it's mud.
One of the things that was talked about in the exhibit that was in the gallery for the first week of May was certainly the access issue, and that was actually going to be the topic of the first panel that got postponed. But in the exhibit, they talked about that at one point there was 160 some public access points to saltwater in Freeport, and officially there's 8 now.
150 to 8?
160 something to 8. Now, I know that there are some more unofficial, access points with that certain shellfish diggers have private relationships, or it's understood what landowners owners. But as you're talking about, the access to the deep water really is only in one place.
That's right.
And that's extremely limited, and it's not just about, closing off private access to the tidal zone, but the deep water is already a pinch point in Freeport.
It's been talk. I used to be on Freeport shore, the water, when they had that. And they were always talking way back then. You might have to find a place to park. If you've got two helpers, you can't, instead of coming with two cars, you park somewhere and come down. I don't know any other thing that can do anything about it right there.
Yep.
Because they don't own any more. They got 50 feet there, and that's it. I don't know.
Eric, what about you? What do you see as the future, and in terms of opportunities and challenges?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at some of the farmers that are coming along, the oyster farmers and some kelp farmers too, it's a really great group of people. They're, these young folks and I can say young now, I'm almost 56, so now that all of a sudden people are quite a bit younger, not the new guy anymore. And what I see is just a lot of really earnest, hardworking people that want to be out on the water, that given the, I think if they can get their farms to work, I think there's some real opportunity out there. I'm heartened to see that just the optimism and kind of the excitement that the young folks have, and it's a nice group of people. I think that's probably the best part. There are lots of challenges that people have to overcome, but it seems like a really neat group of people that works with each other. Also, I've seen that. We're kind of, we kind of do our thing and have our system, so we don't really do a lot of interfacing with the new farmers, but from what I can observe, they look like it looks like a good scene. But the challenges of access, I mean, there's a lot of equipment with the type of grow out that the new farmers use. It's all done on the surface. There's a lot of gear. So I think access is going to be, just as much of a challenge for other users as it has been for lobstermen. I think also, I think the municipal shellfish program, the clamming, they've had their ups and downs with green crab predation, but for a young person who wants to get out on the flats and work hard, I think there's still money to be made out there. They just need to, get out there and do it. It's kind of yeah. So I think there's still opportunity out there. It's a great place to work, and I think people who like to work out there are going to find a way to make it work, like these guys have.
I want to turn back out to the audience now, because I know beyond the folks here that have been in this business for quite a while, we have people in the industry here in the audience, some of whom are innovators in some of those new industries that Eric was just talking about. Often at an event like this, we open it up to questions, and people don't ask questions, they just tell stories. But this is actually a storytelling event, so we're interested in you sharing your own stories, your own history on the water, but you've also got these folks cornered. So if you've been wanting to ask them a question, now is your chance. And we've got microphones. Kate and Suzanne will bring you a microphone.
This ain't good.
Hello. My name is Ed Bradley. I live on McCoy Bay, and I've been there for 50, 60 years, 55 years. Not long for some, but more than others. And it's my observation that with all of the factors that have been described, that there's been a transition occurring in McCoy Bay and outside, where lobstering is less and less evident, and oystering is taking over the bay. And that meets some of the comments that were made here before. And I'm just curious as to whether the people who have been in lobstering on the panel and those who have been in oystering see this transition as something that is going to change the face of the waterfront in Freeport. Will we see aquaculture playing the prominent role lobstering played historically from the time I got here until maybe 5 or 10 years ago, and have aquaculture dominate the waterfront in terms of the number of people, the amount of money, the access that's needed, and all of that? Or will lobstering continue as a strong cultural and economic force in our waters, side by side with a growing interest and success in aquaculture?
Who has their crystal ball? Between water temperature changes and lobster migration and the growth of aquaculture, do you think that lobstering still has a strong future here in Freeport, or do you think it's...
Not where they're fishing. Yeah, it did. It's pretty high. I don't think this, my personal opinion is, I don't think right in the bay, right where we are, I don't think lobster's coming back anytime soon. That's what I think. He thinks it might be different.
You want to just speak a little closer, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, yeah, I don't believe it because it's been going down now for maybe even 5 years. Big difference. And we lost all of eelgrass in 1 year. And things are all changing, and the water's a lot hotter. Now, that may be good for this stuff you're talking about, but it's not for lobsters. So lobsters have to come from further away for us right now.
So some of it's just the supply. Do you think there's also a cultural shift in terms of who's interested in lobstering now?
Well, actually, you see a lot of boats for sale, even from down east and different places. So I would assume there is some.
What do you think, Don?
I think it's still interesting, but I think that eelgrass is coming back. The water temperature last summer was 4 or 5 degrees cooler than it was the year before. And I think up off Canada, there's a river that's dumping water down that supposedly now the warm water that's coming down that is headed toward Canada, not this way. We're getting the cooler water into the Gulf of Maine. So that could change it too. And apparently that has happened before.
And what do you think, Eric, given what you just said?
It's funny you mentioned eelgrass. I got a quick little... Right, so my father invited or allowed down a bunch of eelgrass researchers into McQuaid Bay years ago, and the bay was absolutely full of eelgrass, full. And the next year they came back and there was not a sprig of eelgrass, and my brother was farming his oysters out there, and he looked up at the researchers and he says, "It wasn't us." So I don't know. I mean, there are these, and you're saying it's coming back, so.
Yeah, I can remember back in the mid-50s, the only place you'd see any would be down toward the upper end of Boston's. And then it was just little balls of it here and there. And within 4 or 5 years, we had eelgrass everywhere. Yeah. And it was coming back last summer down where we are. You could see it, just little pieces coming. So there could be more eelgrass this year than there was then. Yeah. And there's less green crabs last summer than there's been for quite a while.
I'm sure that was clarifying for you, Ed. Other questions?
Hi, I've got a question for Eric and maybe for the other people. I learned today from Eric, from your wife, that your oyster farms your oysters were actually down on the bed of the bay, not up in the cages. And so my question is, first of all, how did you develop that method, different obviously from everybody else? And second, is there advantage because it's colder down below than it is up where the what is it called, the traps, the boxes sit?
Yeah, so actually the method that we use is the old-fashioned method. It's nothing we developed. We just copied what they were doing in the Damariscotta. And the cages that people are marketing or raising to market size now actually came along only in the last 10 years. So that's all been new. And that's actually why the oyster industry has exploded, because before you could only find very limited places where you could, bottom that was suitable for the kind of method that we use. But now you can float those cages darn near anywhere, so there's been a profusion of those. So we didn't really invent anything. We just watched what was working up the coast and, tried it down here. And it didn't work in most places we tried. Eventually we found a spot, but not right away.
Quite a few over here.
It's a question actually to both John and Don. What's great about what you guys are able to do is you started something, well, Don, you didn't start, but you continued something that your family was in. And John, Tom is continuing in the business that you started. And I know, Don, you even have grandchildren now that are involved. Now, Don, you've got a boat building company, and so there's that aspect of your life and their lives. And what do you guys think about if you just put that part aside a bit, Don and Tom? Just look at lobstering. Is that going to be able to continue and support your generations that are following you? And is there anybody else in town who has been in that business whose children are continuing in it?
There is still people that will continue, I'm sure. So is that what you're worried about? Yeah, they're going to keep going because there's lobsters enough to keep you going there now.
Yeah, I think that it's an issue for the way it was. I mean, we had thousands of traps up inside, and there isn't any more. They're all out. There's a few, but I don't think you'll see a lot of people trying to get ready to go for a while, anyway, maybe. But there's other issues going on too, what the state's doing, what the government's doing. They shut places down you can fish, and because of right whales or something else, they want to do away with our I forget my own name, but
The haul lines?
Oh, God. I can't think what I want to say. So I do think that it's not very pretty right now for somebody who's young. I got a grandson or two that's in it too. And they go with their father. One of them does. The other one's running Tam Shanter right now. But I don't see it like we had it. I don't. Maybe, and I might be wrong. He might be wrong. But I'm not convinced the water here will cool anytime soon in the over thing. It might. What do I know? So, but that's what I think anyway.
We had a couple more on this side, I think.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much. This is really interesting. I probably have 50 questions, but I'll ask two. And the first is, do you have memory of any deep water access, meaning all tide access, that used to exist in Freeport that got bought out or disappeared because of changes of ownership? And well, I'll let you answer that, and maybe I'll come back.
I'm getting what he's saying.
Are there any other deep water access points other than the town wharf that used to exist that don't exist now that have been privatized?
Not that I know of. But
Well, you used to keep your boat at the end of the stone pier at Wolf's Neck,
yes,
right?
Yes, I did.
So that is one access
It
point.
was, but I was on property with permission to be
Right.
there from the Smiths.
Yeah.
And that wasn't very good because the people lived on the end of it, didn't want me there with it. They didn't want to hear the truck come in the morning, didn't want to hear the skiff running, didn't want to hear the boat being started. So eventually moved into town.
Yep. And the other place that we were talking about before is Little Flying Point, or Tobacco Point as it's called sometimes. And that's long been private, but it is another, deep water access.
Yeah, that would be, if the town had bought that, they'd have something. We wouldn't be in this mess. But they didn't. But on the front of it, there was water enough that they could get a dog to it,
Okay, the front of it though, there's
No,
10 feet of water, if you get off that pretty well, you get in that channel on the upper end.
yeah, they don't have a place. That's the biggest problem. And I don't know, I keep thinking about the end of
Winslow?
Winslow Park, yes, because, I don't know, I remember, do we still own that house
Yep.
there? Yeah. Do away with that and make that something. There's a place there, there's water there.
There's a dock?
Yeah.
Yeah. David, you have a follow-up question?
Hang on.
Thank you so much. Years ago, there were some concerns regarding the quality of water. And I'm just curious whether, in fact, in regards to the state closures, runoff, just all the different impacts that have impacted, especially shellfish, how that has changed, how it evolved, how it is now with the water temperature rising, and just the whole picture of it. I think, Eric, you were pretty conversant about that years ago. I don't know how current you are with it, but I suspect because it's your industry, you know that pretty well.
Yep. No, and I mean, I think it's worth mentioning, too, that David, when he was in the House of Representatives, helped us pass 6 laws to protect the bay water in Augusta. So he was an incredible help to the shellfish and to the clamming industry back then. And I'm happy to report that after we had the DMR audited with your help, they changed staff, and now they have a pretty top flight group of scientists that operate the water quality program there. And so I think administratively they're doing a good job on the water testing and whatnot. But as far as like what all of us can do to protect the water, I mean, it's barely basic, you don't pump your boat out overboard inside the 3-mile line. You don't let your dog, poop near the water and not clean it up. You pump your septic system, you try not to use fertilizers on your lawn. I mean, there are all these things that homeowners can do and townspeople can do to protect, the immediate water quality here in Casco Bay. And Friends of Casco Bay do a good job of advertising those kinds of activities. But we do still have rainfall closures. We had one from this big rain event, but that's part of the territory of what we do. But overall, I think the base has held up pretty well.
And one here and one there.
Pardon my ignorance, but there's been a lot of discussion about aquaculture You hear about clams and mussels and salmon farms. Can somebody explain to me why nothing has been explained about lobster regenerating populations with aquaculture and what the constraints are, what the opportunities are?
Do you know of any trials of lobster farming?
No, I don't.
Laura gets farming lobsters right now.
Never used to be legal. I don't know. It is? No, that's right. You can't
Oh.
raise them.
Right, because you're not allowed to possess the undersized ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, is that in the lab, it's not working very well. So I don't think they've managed to figure out how to scale it, if they were managed to make it legal.
With the changes that are taking place with the population that is in Freeport now, there's a lot of money that's come in, and people here have been able to build homes in areas that used to be camps. You have folks that are on the shore, and they paid a lot of money for their houses for that location. Maybe the sounds of what's going on out there in the water weren't part of the package as far as they saw things. And if a new farm might be going in, what kind of conflicts and oppositions do you see taking place? And if there are those, are there any things taking place to resolve those conflicts?
Yeah, I mean, the state, the Department of Marine Resources has a pretty vigorous lease process that an applicant has to go through. So sound, light, navigation, all the things that a landowner or really anyone in a community might worry about gets vetted. So at least people have a chance to say their piece, and maybe they can have the lease amended or tweaked in a way that would mitigate some of the concerns that folks have. But I think for someone who's buying a piece of waterfront property, and I've said this for 25 years, like they're buying in a commercial, it's like buying a piece of property that abuts a commercial zone. And so you can't go in thinking you're buying a national park. You have to recognize you're buying where people make their living. And so I think realtors maybe could help set expectations, because I think if someone sold their dream house thinking that it's going to be, silent and there'd be no activity, that's not doing the landowner any favors to sort of perpetuate that. So I think expectations are part of it. And noise, I mean, we hear on the water? Leaf blowers. so, and they're a lot louder than our equipment, so I don't know. So just bear that in mind. You're running
True.
Lynn has a question right here.
I really have two questions. One is, I understand that oysters help to clean the water. And the question is that having a significant effect? And the other is with regard to green crabs, which a couple of years ago we were hearing were wiping out soft-shell clams. And now I think I've heard that chefs are learning how to use those as delicacies. Are they still a huge problem? One of you said that they seem to be not as plentiful. So what's happening with the green crabs?
What you were saying?
He's asking about the green crabs. What are you seeing?
I see a lot less green crabs last year than I have for a few years, because I got a hot tank in my boat, and they are a tropical thing, so I put them in that water that's about 180 degrees, and they turn color. and I was dumping that quite regularly. And last summer, I probably didn't get more than 5 gallons of those crabs in there. So I said they dropped a lot.
We trap them off our site, so in our traps, we're not bringing in nearly as many green crabs, which is kind of ironic because I was doing my deliveries at Eventide a few weeks ago, and they had a big bin of green crabs. And I'm like, what do you guys do with those things? And they're like, oh, we make soup out of them. And I was like, are you paying for them? And they're like, yeah, we pay $2 a pound. And I was just thinking of the thousands of pounds that we've thrown away. So there may be a market. So if the green crabs come back, which they're likely to do, maybe there'll be, folks interested in going to get them.
The size of them's gone down too. We caught last summer, a lot of them were quite small.
Yeah.
But I can remember one fall, 3 or 4 years ago, over on the end of Mere Point, when we were taking traps out, we hauled one 4-foot trap, and we had 420, and they were crawling all over the boat at that time. So there was a few of them there then, but I didn't see that anywhere last summer.
Yeah, we've had a couple of cold, like last winter was pretty cold water temperature-wise, which maybe knocked them down. But then your first question was about the impact of the filter feeding in the water column. There is, sort of scientific evidence that they do remove, they clean the water essentially. They make it more transparent, so you get more light penetration to the bottom, which might help eelgrass. But you also have shading from the equipment itself, so there's trade-offs. But it's not, having oysters out there pumping is not a bad thing for the bay. It's a good thing. So that's a bonus if you're an oyster farmer.
Do we have any clammers in the audience? Just curious. Well, yes. Well, I'm just gonna respond a little bit to Lynn's question, since we don't have anybody who can actually speak with authority. So I'll speak. One of the things that I'm hearing from clammers in Freeport is certainly that green crabs and other predation is really the major challenge right now to soft shell clams, and the clamming community in Freeport has been very proactive at working with research institutions along the coast of Maine, working to understand how to remedy that, how to protect juvenile clams to reach maturity. What we know is that it's not an issue of enough spawn, it's about survival rates. And one of the really challenging things about the intertidal zone where clamming happens is that even if it's in front of private land, and Ed can correct me if I get my riparian law wrong, the public has access to the intertidal zone for fishing, but not for farming. And so as these studies continue to show that you can cover and build boxes to protect soft-shell clams, we will continue to get into the question of is sort of having a game preserve in the mud to protect the clams, is that farming or is that fishing? And that's an area that is going to continue to be a challenge as we try to support that industry here in Freeport. But those studies will continue, and right now, in the next couple of years, the studies will be focused on trying to figure out where the mud is the most fertile, where the survival rates are the best, even within those protection boxes, so that they can focus their efforts on seeding in the places where it's going to be the most productive. And certainly, a decrease in the green crabs will help with that. Yes, Ed, you can correct me now. Take the mic from Nat.
You always give me one that doesn't work. So since you've just been the moderator, and I'm going to now turn the table on you a bit, I think the town has had the opportunity to participate in intertidal leasing programs with the state, and it's just never pursued it. Is there any reason you can give us for that?
Eric can speak to that. The other Eric can speak to that.
the Shellfish Commission, we drafted an entire set of policies to do exactly that, to try to create a leasing program in the intertidal. And it went to DMR, and it never saw the light of day. The commissioner at that point wasn't interested, and that was probably 10 years ago. I don't know what's happened since.
So I can understand that the Shellfish Commission has about as much political power as, say, Elon Musk. But the town of Freeport has a lot of power. Look at the people we've had in Augusta who have represented us, and the town has never really gotten behind the Shellfish Commission and said, this would be a really good thing to do for the economics and for the culture of the fishermen in our town. And it would, if you could do it. And I never saw any push from the town to go after this intertidal right. They just listened to the DMR say no, and that's one of the few times I've ever heard this town just listen and not do something right. So I would encourage Mr. Counselor, you, having raised this issue and said how important it is, to go back to the history of what happened and see if there isn't some power or impetus on the council to push this issue further.
I appreciate that. And I, as the council liaison to the Shellfish Conservation Commission, will raise that as soon as I can go to a meeting where that commission has a quorum. Nat has a microphone, and I don't know if he's going to ask a question or if he's going to share with us a story of a very different type of working waterfront industry.
I can go either way, but I had a question for John, particularly because you had brought up the issue of closed waters due to the right whale regulations that are happening. And then, we've all read about these lineless traps, remote control traps, and all that technology that's been experimented with. And I just wonder what your take on all of that is. I mean, obviously we want to protect the right whales, but have we gone too far in that direction? What's your opinion about all of that? Anybody?
Well, my opinion is we don't need to worry about it. But you got somebody sitting out there with you, my son, that can answer better than that, because he's involved in it big time. We're not fishing into it, that kind of stuff ourselves. He's offshore quite a ways, why that's a problem. And it is for some people. And they're not very helpful.
I'm guessing, as somebody who'd rather go back to wooden traps, that ropeless traps are not something that's high on your list.
Oh, I mean, there's people talk about that all the time, but they don't explain how when you come set all your gear here with no buoys on it, if I'm going to come set on top of them, then how are you going to get it with your electric? It don't make any sense to me or any of us, so I don't know if they'll ever do that or not, but they spend a lot of money trying that. They've got a lot of it done. They've had it explained to us, but I don't think it'll work. No one's doing it except them.
Don, do you have thoughts on ropeless traps? On ropeless traps, remote traps?
I think it's a waste of it.
You got to hold it up. Just hold it up to you.
Yeah, I think it's a waste of time. Look at that roaster trap. If you had a string of traps there, how would I know where yours are? I'd set over the top of yours, someone else could set over mine, and then you'd have a real mess.
Did Peter have, no, Thomas? Okay. Nat, do you want to share a story to close us out? Nat warned me that he was going to share a little bit about a very different type of working waterfront industry, and then we'll wrap things up in just a moment.
So I discovered this in my father's files the other day. It was a paper that he wrote on rum running on the coast of Maine. And it was something he was very interested in. And I just wanted to share this one piece because he he mentions particularly South Freeport in here. And some of you probably know about Humpy Dixon, or the stories, the history of Humpy Dixon and down on Dixon Road and the... What's that? Tell the story. Well, I'll read you just this little piece. He wrote, "Last December, I had the privilege of chatting with one of our 90-year-old neighbors who'd lived just above the South Freeport Wharf during Prohibition. Although she was not at home on this particular night, her sister gave me the details. A couple of men came to the door, warned them not to use the telephone or contact anyone, and stay inside. Cases of liquor were loaded at the top of the hill into cars right in front of their house. One or two men stayed outside the house and subsequently gave a gift of a bottle of liquor to our friends." Hang on.
Or turning the page.
Turning the page, yeah. "Apparently, they did not drink themselves, and she said that they took the bottle to L.L. Bean's store and sold it to someone up there. She believes the cars were subsequently stopped by authorities, but her family had not reported them. In the early years after we moved to South Freeport, we heard about some rum-running activities by a gentleman living in the old boathouse at Dixon's Wharf. His story is elaborated by John Gould in the Brunswick Times Record, for which he'd been a reporter. He refers to this gentleman as both Cappy Dixon and Humpy Dixon because he was misshapen. John Gould refers to Humpy making frequent excursions to St. Pierre and Miquelon Islands in an effort to subdue the intense thirst of the United States of America brought on by Neil Dow. John also tells an amusing story of a local sheriff who climbed to the top of an apple tree at the head of Cappy's driveway, awaiting a load to come in by small boat from one of the larger vessels offshore. A prearranged signaling process warned the boat not to come in, and the sheriff's tree climbing efforts were wasted. Inside Cappy's old building, which some of you know is there are two houses down on the shore next to the yacht club. Inside Cappy's old building, located at the end of the wharf over the water, now used as summer cottage, there is a unique wooden winch system for lifting heavy items, presumably liquor, through a trap door, which still exists. A trap door from a boat underneath the building at high tide. You can still see these accoutrements, which have been preserved for history. So, you know, this is a whole side of the working waterfront that many of us have forgotten about, but it's an important part of history. And you're welcome to this paper, Eric, if you want.
So, and to that point, I was already told by these gentlemen up here that there were certain stories that they probably wouldn't tell. So you haven't heard everything, but maybe after the recording devices stop, you can ask them on the way out. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. At Freeport Historical Society, one of the reasons in our new entrance we have a giant photo map of Freeport, the whole town, is because for a lot of people whose experience of Freeport is somewhere between exit 20 and exit 22 on 295 or Route 1, they never see the water. They don't know why we're even called Freeport if we're not on the water. And certainly the water has been an integral part of the history of the town, and it still is a vital part of the present and the culture of the town. I want to thank all of these folks for sharing their long history, in many cases various family traditions of what it has meant to be on the working waterfront. And I encourage you to find out more about how you can support the working waterfront. I encourage you to come to next Thursday's event, which will be here, and you can find more about that at the Meeting House Arts website. And I encourage you to speak to other folks that are part of the Working Waterfront who are innovators, just like many of these folks have been innovators in their time. We have folks that are doing really quite new and interesting things all over the waterfront that are really pointing to the future, and you'll hear more about that next week. Suzanne, any closing words?
Yeah, just real quick, thank you. It's a wonderful panel, everything I could have personally hoped for. I do want to recognize Bob Stevens, who helped make this panel actually happen. I honestly would not have seen this. This would not have happened but for him. So I want to say thank you. Also, lastly, is Ken Sparta and the Oyster Bar has kindly said that it will stay open late tonight. So if we're all about making the restaurant scene happen and restaurants to stay open later, go and say hello. They're open tonight. Thanks.
Thank you all. Have a great night.